You know, I really don't like when black men ask me questions like this because usually it's a facetious question, but we're gonna break this down today. But before we get into that, how y'all doing? My name is Professor Odie. I'm a pre-licensed clinician in the state of Pennsylvania. I'm also a life coach who focuses on emotional regulation and emotional intelligence. And my master's is in community psychology with a focus in Afrocentric theory. So, white supremacist masculine orientation is a masculine orientation that makes you the dominator, it makes you the ruler, and it makes you the lawmaker by any means necessary. When this contextualization is rejected, you become angry, you become violent, and you reject the reality of the people around you unless it aligns with your own reality. Now, another one of your questions in my comments were, who subscribes to this? So once again, we're gonna break this down historically because a lot of y'all pretend like y'all don't know where this masculinity comes from, and quite frankly, it's an annoying conversation. So y'all know me, I don't pull up nothing that's not peer-reviewed or deeply researched. So, what are gender roles and stereotypes? Gender roles are stereotypes regarding attitudes, attributes, and actions imposed upon men and women based on gender. These kinds of preconceptions are usually harmful to society, and understanding why and what they are overcoming, right? What causes gender roles? A number of people point them to biological factors, others point out that it all comes from sociological aspects. Whatever may be the case, it's clear that the gender roles as we know them today originated during the Victorian era. The Victorian era, which comprises most of the 19th century, was characterized by strong ideas regarding the role of each gender in society. Mostly, men were expected to present themselves in public spheres, such as politics and business. Women were expected to stay at home, taking care of the private sphere. From Britannica, the Victorian era in British history, the period between approximately 1820 and 1914, corresponding roughly but not exactly to the period of Queen Victoria's reign, and characterized by a class-based society, a growing number of people available to vote, and a growing state economy in Britain's status as the most powerful empire in the world. Why is this relevant? Between 1820 and 1914, what happened in black history? We had the emancipation of the enslaved, the beginning of the Reconstruction era, and the introduction of Jim Crow. Now, I need y'all to hold on to that. Once again, I don't pull up none that's not peer-reviewed or deeply researched. Here we have a dissertation, Race, Masculinity, and Personality Development, Understanding the Black Male Experience in America. It says, previous research indicates that black men's definition of manhood does overlap with traditional aspects of masculinity, including restricted emotionality, self-reliance, the importance of being a provider, aggressiveness, competitiveness, and ambition. These are the very same ideologies that Levant and Powell in 2017 identified traditional masculine ideologies are endorsed by white, Western heterosexual men. And it says David and Brandon identify 4 key components of TMI. Men should not be feminine. Men should be respected for achievement and success. Men should not demonstrate weakness. And men should be adventurous and risk-taking, even if this means participating in reckless violence. So remember when I told y'all to hold on to the fact that the Victorian era, the Reconstruction, and the emancipation of the enslaved people all happened around the same time. This is also the period of time where the groundwork for black men to be locked out of financial masculinity or financial aspects of masculinity was laid. We did not get the 40 acres and a mule that we were promised. Sharecropping as an economy was used by white landowners in order to put black workers into deep amounts of debt in order to work themselves off of the land. And black men who chose not to engage in the system and not have jobs were identified as vagrant. Thus, they were criminalized for not engaging in the system of sharecropping. Allow me to continue. That means that black men who did not decide to engage in this class warfare or gender warfare between black men and white men, if they were even able to do so, were identified as useless and criminal. Nah, let me cook, hold on, because it's still relevant today. Staples in 1998 identified that black men may be angry over the position they occupy in society, leading to frustration that may cause them to adaptively or maladaptively engage in ways that may affect their relationships with both themselves and others. A prior study done by Levant and Majors in 1997 found that black men endorse traditional masculinity the most, followed by white men. And because we are locked out of the system and have been historically locked out of the system, black men may develop a defense mechanism that greatly adheres to traditional male role norms, which was termed cool pose by Majors and Bilson. So once again, I've said it before, I'm going to continue to say it. This masculine posturing that a lot of black men do is a defense mechanism for knowing that we are locked out of the system of masculinity in the United States that was designed for white men. And see, when brothers ask me foolish questions like this, it gets me heated because it means that you are not thoroughly studied about where it is that your masculinity comes from, yet you want to come and you want to have conversations about masculinity with who does and who does not subscribe to it. And when somebody tells you it's mostly the brothers who subscribe to this ideology, y'all say, oh, no, it's not. Yes, it is. Once again, you are engaging in masculine posturing by denying the reality of the situation that a lot of black men do not want to admit because we gotta be oh so real and we black men so we don't da bullshit. Once again, you are using white supremacist oriented masculinity in order to define your masculinity, and you are using the excuse that nobody will respect you if you utilize another masculinity in order to adhere to that masculinity. That is literally the song of black men. And I can already hear the comments, oh, you bashing black men. No, I'm not. What I'm saying is understand your masculinity and assert it differently from how it is that white men assert their masculinity. Black women will love and respect you for it, I am telling you. And the ones that don't are lost in the sauce of white supremacy themselves as well. So altogether, if you are still utilizing the excuse that nobody's gonna give you anything in order to build, assert, and affirm a collaborative masculinity, you are still operating in a token economy mindset, meaning you gotta give me in order for me to perform, which is still white supremacist oriented masculinity.
Welcome back to the Dean's Office. I'm Joseph Ward, and I'm with Dean Rodney Smith, aka Heavy Hooks, and we are breaking down this video, or breaking down the concept of white supremacy oriented masculinity. I saw this video two, maybe 3 weeks ago, and when I first listened to it, you know, bells and stuff started going on because I'm not going to act like I know it all, and I'm not going to act like I know everything. But you got to understand, I have a whole degree in Black psychology. I got a whole degree, and I spent 5.5 years at FAMU immersed in an environment by master Black psychologists. So once again, I'm not trying to say I know it all, but I am trying to say I know something. So as I'm watching this video, you know, bells and stuff start to go off. And then I shoot it to Brother Rodney. And my question to him was, you know, tell me what you think. And we've been talking over the weeks, and we're agreeing on a lot of things about this video and about what the gentleman is saying. Because the first question, and I'm sure you had the first question, I'm sure you had this question too, Rodney, like, what is white supremacy oriented masculinity? Because I've never heard of it. Have you heard of it before?
No, I had a hard time finding anything that had it in that order either.
I'm just saying. So that was the first thing is, okay, white supremacy oriented masculinity. I've never heard of that. And I am pretty immersed in the Black psychology realm. Matter of fact, my videos on Mondays, the books I'm reading, the books that you people are choosing, my people are choosing, are books about Black psychology. And to be more specifically, the last book we just got through reading, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, we were covering these topics. So we have an understanding of how Black people have been oriented within American society, but have no concept of white supremacy oriented masculinity. And then my other question was, well, does white supremacy oriented femininity exist? But you know, so we're going to get into all these different things. So just overall, like, what will, because I know what my thoughts were. I just gave my thoughts. What were your thoughts when you first saw this video? When I said,
I want to play off of what you said before I go into my thoughts. When you said you don't know everything, the reason I want to bring that up is because the research on Black masculinity is limited, and they say it in the studies. So he doesn't know everything. Thus, if there's limited research, to me, that meant he was criticizing Black men for using white frameworks. Well, what do you think you're doing, sir? If there's limited research, you must be using European or white frameworks to evaluate and analyze Black folks and their behaviors. So that those were some of my initial thoughts.
Yes. Well, let's get into it. Let's get into what he was using. So I got a whole list. It was, what is white supremacy oriented masculinity, or are we just facing racism? Like, do we have to dress it up and make it sound fancy, or are Black people experiencing racism, white supremacy? And so when we're talking about white supremacy oriented masculinity, so I'm sure both you and I agree that Black men have been oriented in a specific way, and the only other example that we've had was white men.
Facts.
We're in America, right?
We're in America, right?
But the same will hold true for Black women,
which he doesn't bring up.
I'm just saying, because what we do know from Dr. Amos Wilson, from Neely Fuller Jr., from Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, from Dr. Joy DeGruy, that both Black men and Black women have been negatively socialized by white supremacy. We know that because we can see it in our behaviors.
Correct.
And so that.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
To add on to that, based on our bodies, this system is going to use us in different ways. So if we look at the first waves of the slaves, they were African males. And then you need a way to breed these people. So more females were brought in. And then once we were here, we were given different jobs. And then once slavery ended, the lethal forms of violence were more geared towards the Black males. The most lethal forms of violence are not geared towards women. And we can see that in the Holocaust, whatever form of genocide or war, colonialism you want to look at, the most lethal forms of violence goes to outgroup males and not usually the females. Right.
And when we're talking about socialization, right? So nobody's going to disagree that in order for white men to be able to have dominance and maintain dominance, Black men had to become subordinate. And in order for Black men to survive, Black men had to assimilate to the white society. But the same holds true for for Black women.
Correct.
So if we have negative behavior outcomes as Black men, there are negative behavior outcomes for Black women. So one of my main things is, let's not be disingenuous and let's call it like it is down the line.
And I think he's doing this because he's bought into the intersectionality movement. And that's why he's gearing this towards a negative slant on Black men and leaving Black women out of it. And a lot of the literature is like that too. We know that's how it is when you go to college. When you study gender studies, you only study in women.
Right. But also we're talking about negative aggressive behaviors, right? Yeah. So, because that's the main thing that he's getting at when he's talking about white supremacy oriented masculinity, is negative aggressive behaviors that are harmful, especially to women, to Black women. So I wonder what are his thoughts on how women are treating Simone Biles and her husband right now.
That's a good comparison, because it's not the men attacking this couple. Because if the roles are reversed and Simone said she was the catch, Black men would have said nothing. They would have supported the couple. We wouldn't have thought about it in that way. But I think, again, because of intersectionality and the way the society wants to slam Black men, they look at it through this lens where we're the enemy, and we're not looking at it like you said. We're both experiencing racism in different ways. Right.
But also, I'm gonna ask this question now, and we're gonna answer it later.
Okay, cool.
Because you and I, we both know the answer because we read the information. But so, is it a bad thing? Does it en masse lead to overall negative outcomes if Black men adopt ideas of traditional masculinity or Black masculinity? Is that negative? Is that a bad thing? Do we have negative outcomes if Black men do adopt ideas of traditional masculinity or Black masculinity? So I'm asked that. Tell me what you think in the comments. Tell us what you all think in the comments, and then we're going to come back to that.
All right. Can I say something about what he said at the beginning of the video?
Go ahead.
He said that this white supremacist masculinist orientation makes you a dominator, ruler, lawmaker by any means. So my first thought is he's assuming that Black men want to be like white men and be the sole dominator, ruler, and lawmaker. And it assumes that our anger is because we're not able to be like white men. And I totally disagree with that.
Man, look, We're on the same page. I was just getting to that. That's in my. I literally have them notes.
Okay.
That was like my next note because I got the whole thing right.
Okay.
So he said the characteristics are the dominator, ruler, and lawmaker by orientation. When rejected, you become angry and violent and reject realities of others around you.
Yep.
So one thing I did is I was at work when I was putting some of this information together. So I decided to go first ask the women who I know would disagree with a lot of things. Basically, the women who tell me I hate black women the most. I go ask them first. So, and it's a blind study for them. So I asked them, I say, tell me who do these characteristics sound like? If I tell you that this person is a dominator, ruler, and lawmaker by orientation, when rejected, you become angry and violent and reject the realities of others around you. Who does that remind you of in society? And all of them without fail said black women. And I asked black women this, and all of them without fail, no multiple choice.
Just left it open.
Right. Who does this remind you of? It reminds you of black women. Because, all right, so at what point in American history did black men have the power or ability to be dominator, ruler, and lawmaker?
Man, you stole my notes somehow, bro. At no point in time did this happen.
Right.
And I wrote too, at what point in time did black men get together with the power to say, oh, we're going to be imperialists now. We're going to be colonialists. Oh, we're going to lynch non-blacks. Never did that happen. None of our literature do we talk about doing those things.
Man, look. In order for a black man to have had the power to be dominator, ruler, and lawmaker, white men would have had to acquiesce some of their power.
Yep.
And show us where white men gave up any form of their power to black men, and how is it feasible for white men to give up any semblance of their power to black men if you want to remain dominant and in control?
Right. So what we did see was an expansion of whiteness. We see the Irish become white, the Polish, all these other Eastern European countries become white to make whiteness more powerful. We don't see them relinquishing power to black men.
Right, but now toward the end of the video, he also talked about black men need to choose other identities of masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean, and what other ones should we be choosing? Because are traditional ideas of masculinity actually harmful?
I don't think so.
And is there any information? Because the information we have, it was pertaining to black men, and so far we haven't found anything to say that these ideas are truly harmful. And of course, we got our cliffhanger. We're going to get back to that. But are traditional ideas of masculinity actually harmful to a society? Like, the question isn't, can they be harmful? Because we know they can. The question is, by and large, are they harmful?
I don't think so. And I think that he's conflating patriarchy with masculinity.
Right.
Because I could still be masculine if we was living in a matriarchy. I could still have masculine traits and exhibit masculinity.
But okay, so a further question, is patriarchy inherently bad?
See, I don't think so either.
Is the way we practice patriarchy right now in America, is it bad?
If we being black men, I would say no, because I just don't see black men trying to be what he said, a dominator and a ruler.
Well, I mean, because I don't see black women, white women, Asian women, Hispanic women trying to get out of America to exist in another form of.
Ooh, good point.
Because nobody's trying to live in an egalitarian. Because why aren't women running to Sweden, where they got the egalitarian societies, right? Why aren't women going to places that are more matriarchal?
I got one for you. You just made me think it is then. To piggyback on both what we're saying, this is why black men are so loved overseas, is because we are more egalitarian.
Man,
when you listen to the videos online, that's all they talk about. You can get along with black men. They don't try to dominate me. They don't hit me.
Man, look, we here, me and you, we here, right? Because yes, by nature or by tradition, Black people are egalitarian.
Yes.
Now but I don't want to get ahead of myself, but by nature, Black people are egalitarian. Now, I thought what was interesting is, as a professor, he was annoyed by somebody asking him what white supremacists.
That was the first thing he said, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
It's just facetious.
yeah. And it's like, is it facetious or are you making up something? Are you having this defensive posture because white supremacist oriented masculinity is something that don't really exist? And if it do exist, who knows about it and who's talking about it? Google white supremacist oriented masculinity and see what you find. Because
I couldn't find nothing.
Like I Googled it. I still got my Google page up, and the closest thing I could get to it is there's a study on JSTOR.org, and it is Testeria, the dis-ease of Black men in white supremacist patriarchal culture.
Yep, that's what popped up for me too.
Right. And basically that is an abstract of what they want to get into and what they want to study, if they have the whole study, but they don't have the whole study there. You have to buy it. But the second thing he cited was a study covering that. So we're going to get to that.
Okay.
But if you're a professor and somebody asks you what is white supremacy oriented masculinity, you should be able to teach us about it.
Right. And he didn't pull up an article on white supremacy oriented masculinity.
No, he didn't. He didn't.
None of the stuff he referenced was white supremacist oriented masculinity papers. None of it.
So the first article, the first peer reviewed article he referenced, you see my bunny is peer reviewed. The first peer review article he referenced was what are gender roles and stereotypes? And this is on WebMD, and this is by Julian Selman. And it's peer
reviewed.
It's peer reviewed by Poonam Sakdev, right? So who is Poonam Sakdev? Because you got to ask that question. So Poonam Sakdev obtained her bachelor's degree in medicine and surgery from Madras Medical College in India. She graduated from the University of Gujarat in 2003 with a Doctor of Medicine degree specializing in pediatrics. Since 2008, she has extensive experience in writing on various medical topics for general public and doctors. Her social interests include working for underprivileged children. When not working, she likes spending time gardening and reading. So how does any of that pertain to white supremacy oriented masculinity?
I'm lost. I don't know.
An article on gender roles and stereotypes was peer reviewed by a pediatrician rather. Okay, and so this article is an opinion piece as well. All you got, link in the description.
Yeah.
If you read it, it's an opinion piece. They're talking about what ifs and if this happened and what if all these things. None of these are based. None of the information in this is based off of actual findings of what gender roles are.
Right.
It's all opinions, and not saying that it's wrong or right, but what we are saying, it's all opinions. So he's presenting this information as if it's factual information, but this first article is an actual opinion piece.
Like most are on that website.
Right.
It's not like the study we're going to look at.
Right. So he also gets this article gets into talking about, because this is what he referenced to talking about the Victorian gender roles, or how gender roles were further defined during the Victorian era. Say whatever may be the cause, it's clear that gender roles as we know them today mostly originated during the Victorian era. So when you hear that, what does that mean to you?
Oh, I'm so glad. I immediately thought about how he left out women and how they are using the Victorian age against black men and saying we need to be more chivalrous because they want to live like some queen in a castle.
Great
That's
point.
immediately all these shows on Netflix about Bridgerton and all of this stuff about romanticizing the Victorian age. That's immediately what I thought about.
So that sounds like white supremacy oriented femininity to me.
Facts.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Okay. But that's a great point too, because yes, if you're going to say that these gender roles were defined during this era and these gender roles lead to the negative behaviors of black men toward black women, then you also have to say, well, these gender roles that black women expect black men to have, and the ideas, like you said, the ideas of chivalry and the male's role versus the female role is also rooted in the Victorian era. It's also rooted in white supremacy. It's just white supremacy from a feminine lens.
Yep. Totally.
So, we got to be equal across the board. But, I went a step further.
All right.
So, because my thing is, what does that mean that the Victorian era shaped gender roles? Like, what does that mean? Because does that mean that the gender roles that we have today were created during the Victorian era? Were they redefined? And if they were redefined during the Victorian era, how were they redefined? Because a greater question is, what were the gender roles before the Victorian era? And so from your understanding and your knowledge of history, let's go back 10,000 years. What was the roles of men and women from or just as far back as you can go? What were the roles of men and women?
I would say we would have started off as hunters and gatherers until we got into agriculture. So I would have said they were probably more egalitarian, except that women always could have babies. So there's going to be periods where men are going to go out and hunt and gather when the women can't. And they're going to be left taking care of the children because the men are going to be out protecting and hunting and gathering.
So if it's 10,000 years ago, jobs as we know them today don't exist.
Right.
But my job is hunting.
Yeah.
So, because one of the things they talked about is the aggressive behaviors and like the traditional masculine characteristics that men have. They say they were redefined in during the Victorian era. But I'm challenging people to think about these masculine traits that they were not created or defined during the Victorian era, because if I have to go hunt for my food, I have to be more aggressive than my wife who's raising a child.
Facts. I mean, you can't have it enough. I mean, you can't escape biology. And then biology is going to lead to how we lead our social lives.
No. These gender roles even bleed into other animals. Imagine you ever seen two giraffes fight?
They kick each other.
They swing their necks at each other.
Swing their necks, okay.
But so imagine you a male giraffe. I'm a male giraffe. You have your harem, and I want to come in and take over your harem, but I'm going to do it passively. You are aggressive. You are aggressive male who became the bull of you got this harem being aggressive because that's the way of nature.
Right.
So you're ready to neck me and just bam, just knock me down. I come in passive. I'm not going to win. That's the nature of the male species, is to be more aggressive than the female. Those it's a difference between something that can be harmful and something that is by large harmful. That's two different things. But so when we're talking about further defining, what do we mean by the Victorian era further defined or redefined gender roles? So during the Victorian period, and this is Gender Roles in the 19th Century, an excerpt by Catherine Hughes from the University of East Angela. So during the Victorian period, men and women's roles became more sharply defined than any time in history. In earlier centuries, it had been usual for women to work alongside husbands and brothers in the families. Living over the shop made it easy for women to help out by serving customers or keeping accounts while also attending to their domestic duties. As the 19th century progressed, men increasingly commuted to their place of work, the factory, shop, or office. Wives, daughters, and sisters were left at home all day to oversee the domestic duties that were increasingly carried out by servants. From the 1830s, women started to adopt the Caroline, a huge bell-shaped skirt that made it virtually impossible to clean and grate or sweep stairs without tumbling over. Now, the next paragraph goes into something that's called separate spheres. But you gotta, I'm hoping people are listening to what I just read.
Me too.
Because basically, and separate spheres is important because basically what I just read to you, the only thing the Victorian era did, and far as redefining gender roles between men and women, was take men and women out of the same sphere.
Right. Right. Because we had the industrial revolution. But like we said, that's why you asked that question at the beginning. Like, how were we 10, 15,000 years ago? We were working together, except when the women had to take care of the kids and bear children. Just like up to the Victorian age, you had the Industrial Revolution, you had a separation of the sexes.
That's it. That's it. It didn't define the roles. It just separated us in the spheres that we were in, but we still were doing the same roles, men and women. Now, that's not absolute across the board. Now, we want to say that because there are going to be some people who look at some of the outliers. They're going to look at the outliers and say, well, this society did this and this society did that. We understand that ideas of traditional masculinity were not stagnant across the board. But by and large, when we're talking about provision and protection, there's that, by and large, something that is relegated to men or women. Because at the end of the day, that's really what we're talking about, provision and protection.
Right.
So who is provision and protection, by and large, throughout the history of man, have been relegated to? Men or women?
So it's majority men.
So do we have to be more aggressive to be able to provide and protect, or no?
I would say yes. You better be, like your example with the giraffe.
I'm just saying. But also, once again, understanding when somebody says that the Victorian period redefined gender roles, it was just a separation of spheres. It did not say women go to the kitchen and men go to the work. It did not say that. It just said women work in this sphere and men work in this sphere, but y'all keep doing the same thing that y'all been doing.
And again, like you're pointing out, again, this is because them early factory jobs were dangerous. And who typically throughout history has done the most dangerous jobs?
Us.
Men.
Okay. Women have all the opportunity in the world to sign up for these jobs now, and they're not signing up for them.
Facts.
Well, why not? What's stopping women? Some people would say, well, society has told women that they can't do these jobs, but we're in a time where women have been told for I'm 40. I'm gonna be 40 in 13 days. So my whole lifetime, women have been told that they can do anything and be anything. So why aren't women trying to dig ditches? Why aren't women trying to do all the other things that men are trying to do, the more aggressive jobs, the more laboring jobs? Now, this is not an indictment on women. This is just saying that when you present information, let's not present half-cocked information to make men look like we're just terrorists among our women.
Facts. That's so true. I totally agree with that. And like he said, y'all, we're not saying women can't do these jobs. We're saying, why aren't they, since they have the ability to? And I would say times have changed, and we see why. It's more money going to more white collar jobs than it is these manual labor jobs.
Right. And also, to end the idea of anybody who watches this channel, to end the idea that women were not allowed to work until the modern era. That's not true at all. especially for black women. Well, just humanity though. Let's take before America. Let's take before America was formed. You think when Native Americans was on this land that women were just sitting around doing nothing?
That's why they don't give them a good. You don't get a good, clear picture of history in school, because I'm a school teacher, and they don't lay it out like that. The kids don't understand that for the majority of our history, men and women work together, on farms here.
Right, right. Like black people, we are egalitarian people.
Yes.
Yes, it is true. Black people who have been affected by colonialism and or white supremacy, yes, we have all adopted white supremacy oriented traits. All of us, males and females. But at the end of the day, does adopting traditional traits, because white supremacy traits and traditional traits of masculinity are two different things, and people have to understand that too. Because when we talk about traditional masculinity, we only talk about it in the context of white supremacy. And yes, we have been more so exposed to ideas of white masculinity, but white masculinity is also built off of traditional ideas of masculinity that have been standard across the board, no matter your race, religion, creed, culture, anything like that. People got to understand that.
No, that's true.
So, but because it goes into, because I got these notes down, so it's like black man's ideas of manhood overlap with traditional aspects of masculinity, including restricted emotionality, self-reliance, being a provider, aggressiveness, competitiveness, and ambition. These ideas are endorsed by white men, but these ideas exist before the Victorian era. And of course, yes, we covered that. Yes, these ideas existed before the Victorian era. So.
One thing too, I don't know if you got this in your notes, but to me, he spent his whole time trying to convince us that masculinity is connected to finances too, because he said the term financial masculinity, and he stuck with that. And I think that is capitalist and white supremacist itself.
Right.
The idea that finances is a part of your masculinity.
That's true. Yeah, he talked about finances, and he talked about white supremacy, white supremacist ideas of masculinity, or just the idea of traditional masculinity, because finances go into it with the traditional masculinity, as if you adopt traditional ideas of masculinity, then therefore you're going to inherently be violent. You're going to inherently oppress women, go these things, and like probability and possibility are two different things.
Facts.
Because there's a possibility that black men, that men can be oppressive. There's a possibility. But what's the probability of men today actually being oppressive? But what's the actuality of it as well? Especially black men.
From my experiences, black men usually want a woman with money or want to build with them. They don't want to dominate on tell them to just stay at home. To me, they want to, use the woman to come together and build something bigger than what they got individually. I don't see many men saying, I just need you to stay at home.
I mean, by and large, most men are not telling their women to stay at home.
No.
Because we can't afford it.
That's what my other point is. There's very few of us that make enough.
Now, with that being said, you can go to blackdemographics.com and look at the statistics for yourself. Black men are both economically, black men are both doing better than black women and worse than black women. So you can go look at it for yourself. Black women, there are more black women who, there are more black women who make $40,000 and less than black men.
Right, but in the other income brackets, black men made more.
Right. So the higher
income brackets,
the more black men make more money than black women.
Yeah.
But that's being said, because that leads to what he was talking, like you said, he get to the economic thing, because he talked about black men being locked out of the economic gains of America. And that leading to black men, and because he specifically said that is leading to black men having basically signs of inferiority. But if you read the study, and if you listen to what he's saying, listen to the words the man said. The man didn't give you definitive words. He said may and could and should and stuff like that, because that's what the article was saying. If you read through the article, like Rodney said earlier, this article is based off of a lot of assumptions and a lot of studies that they had to do themselves. But it also indicated that it's not a lot of information out here that studied Black men and how white supremacy actually really affected Black men and create what he calls white supremacy-oriented masculinity, because nowhere in that article, in the WebMD article or the study, is white supremacy-oriented masculinity nowhere mentioned. It's not mentioned in any of those things, right?
Right.
So like I said, Black men being locked out of wealth began around Reconstruction and Jim Crow, sharecropping. Talk about sharecropping and Reconstruction and Jim Crow and things like that. Black men who did not become well. He talked about understanding the Black male experience, and that was on page 9. So I had to make sure I mark my thing so I can go to page 9. Let me write this down so I come back to page 40, because page 40 will be important. And remember, a link to this study is in the bio, but page 9. And so page 9 is Black. Let me go to the beginning. It said the influence of socialization on male identity have been proposed to significantly contribute to mental health of Black men, although usually in negative ways. Within the current framework, the pressure to meet dominant European standards of manhood within a socio-political structure that also denies equal economics and social privileges may create feelings of inadequacy among Black men. These factors, when met with racism and discrimination, exacerbate the psychological distress of Black men. Staples theorizes that Black men may be angry over the position they occupy in society, leading to frustration that may cause them to adaptively or maladaptively engage in ways that may affect their relationship with both themselves and others. So you and I have some discourse right now on it of what I just read. So because both of us has read this. So after reading the whole study, hearing what he said in the video and listening to what I just said, does that sound like definitive answers, or that sounds like the hypothesis or the theories that they have to lead toward them finding definitive answers?
Yes, it sounds like theories leading them to find a definitive answer. And even in the study, again, it says more research needs to be done. That's why they're saying maybe and could.
So, and this is why we encourage people to read and research for yourself, because he's basically using opinions and theories to say that white supremacy-oriented masculinity exists, and this is why Black men behave this way toward Black women. He's using theory.
Right, which is why I was saying that Black men usually want to build. They don't get violent. In my experience, I don't see the majority of Black men being violent to their female counterpart because they feel stuck. Are there some? Yes, but some is not the majority. And that's what he's trying to lead us to believe, that the violence we see is because we're locked out financially. And I don't see that in my life.
Right, but he's basing that off of the theoretical part of this article and not the actual findings, and that's what we want people to understand. There are.
I see what you're saying.
This study is 63 pages long. Most of the information that you can read goes to about page 48, 49. So you spend 48, 49 pages reading this information, but you don't even have to go that far. You can get to page 36, 38 to 40, and then start to give you their findings, which we're about to get into now. The findings, because the findings are going to shut down everything he was talking about.
Which is why he didn't talk about them.
So you go ahead. Read them the findings, man. Give them that information, bro.
Hold on, let me go pull it back up. I thought you was about to read it.
I was, but I was like, man, you do the honors.
All right, hold on. Let me go.
It was on page 40.
All right.
Yeah, get this brother. He just saying stuff, man. It's just disingenuous. That's why
Yeah.
we have to do our own research. We have to read for ourselves. Because it should be page 40.
All right. I got it pulled up. You
Yeah,
said what page?
the second page 40, where the second paragraph where it says as anticipated.
All right. Read there.
Yeah.
All right, as anticipated, this story found that more conformity to traditional masculine norms was associated with greater endorsement of dark triad traits, while conformity to Black masculine norms was associated with lower endorsement of dark triad traits. This pattern has been demonstrated in recent research by Waddell in 2020, with findings suggesting that hegemonic masculinity was a significant predictor of willingness and perceived ability to emotionally manipulate others. Although this sample primarily consisted of white men and women, it appears that hegemonic or traditional masculinity may also share variance with dark triad traits within this sample as well. Exploratory analysis revealed that unequal opportunity, emotional restriction, and the pressure to prove oneself while also disproving stereotypes of Black men in society was positively related dark triad traits, particularly Machiavellianism. This supports the notion that endorsement of dark triad traits, although adaptive under the current socio-political context, could also potentially be the overvaluing and utilization of traditional masculine approach to achieve personal and professional goals in response to an abnormal societal positioning.
And then it goes on to say, conversely, exploratory findings suggest that leadership, positive role model, provider, protector, and importance of familiar relationships on the development of masculinity were negative related to the endorsement of dark triad traits. So for context, dark triad traits is narcissism, Machiavellianism, and what was it?
Oh shoot.
Narcissism, Machiavellianism, and what was the third one?
Hold on, I get it.
Dark triad. What was that? Do I have it in my notes? Dark triad. Because that's important.
Is it psychopathy or
Yeah.
psychopathy.
Yeah, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. And so the norms with the great endorsement it said, hold up. So conversely, exploratory findings suggest that leadership, positive role model, provider, protector, and importance of familiar relationships on the development of masculinity were negatively related to the endorsement of dark triad traits. As such, adherence to Black masculine norms, emphasizing the importance of leadership and family and influence to approach interpersonal professional relationships, such as more communal ways to oppose to a more agentic and individualistic approach. What was the other? It was something else. It was another part. Although previous studies have found a negative association between low self. So, although previous studies have found negative association between self-esteem and conformity in traditional masculine norms in younger Black men, this study found a positive relationship between conformity to both traditional and Black masculine norms and self-esteem. Interestingly, greater endorsement of traditional masculine norms, competitiveness, emotional restriction, risk-taking, dominance, self-reliance, importance of work, and having power over women was more strongly and positively related to self-esteem in comparison to adherence of Black masculine norms. So basically, what the study concluded is when Black men do adhere to traditional masculine norms and Black masculinity norms, and they have not internalized negative aspects of racism, we get positive results. So when a Black man is socialized negatively in America and the Black man internalizes racism, white supremacy, and all of the negative aspects of inferiority complex, all these things, when the Black man internalizes that, that's going to increase the chances of that Black man being violent, being narcissistic, being psychopathic, being having the Machiavellian traits, the dark triad traits, what the brother would say is white supremacy-oriented masculinity. But the study is not saying that just because you adopt traditional masculine traits that you are going to exhibit white supremacy-oriented masculinity.
Correct. And the more that we adopt, the more family ties and more communal, the less we're narcissists and stuff, it says. So I thought that was really good. But of course, he didn't bring that up on the video.
Right. Also, it got into the more that Black people adopt ideas of self-reliance and self-sufficiency, that decreases our chances of displaying the dark triad traits. And
Right.
so I'm guessing he's calling the dark triad traits white supremacy-oriented masculinity. Now that
Maybe he is. Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe he is.
And he just called that what he want to call it for himself. But from the study, they call it the dark triad traits, which is psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism. And within that study, it breaks down what all three of those are.
Yeah.
So, but that's what like I said, that's what I got as I read more through the studies and I read more through the information, because I just had to go and I was just Googling and Googling. I got a whole bunch of tabs open, just Googling. and it really came to me that, okay, once again, we're not arguing with him of whether we have been negatively socialized by white supremacy, or even if Black men have been negatively affected by white supremacy. We're not arguing with him, but we are saying he's being disingenuous when he's saying that, giving us the slant that only Black men have been negatively affected by white supremacy. And when he's saying that adopting traditional ideas of masculinity is inherently white, and they are inherently negative and violent.
Right. So viewers, remember, that's why he brought up, how did we live our lives way in the past 10, 15,000 years ago? So you can see it has nothing to do with race or nationality. This is just people trying to survive.
Right.
And
right.
naturally pick up these roles.
Right. Right. And does it make more sense for the women to go out and hunt, or do the men go out and hunt?
Make more sense.
If you've never hunted, you don't get it, do you? Like, we ain't talking about hunting with guns. We're talking about hunting with spears.
Right. But women did it some too, but not when you're pregnant.
Right.
Not when you just had a baby.
Right. And that's a good point too. Women did do it throughout history. We can find vast examples of women hunting with their men, and sometimes women being the main hunters. But that's not in large what happened.
Right.
That's not. Those were other cultures expressing themselves and how they express themselves, because ideas of masculinity do vary. They're not static. I mean, they're not standard from all male groups. But what we do know in mass, most men go do the heavy lifting and most women do the domestics.
Right. And again, I think we would be, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't think it would work out in our favor if we made women do the most dangerous jobs, because we could have, if one man and multiple women and reproduce.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It would benefit us to have women dying off in high numbers.
Right. But that's also a good point too, because like something like war, like we talk about aggression as it's a bad thing, while sitting behind an army, the most aggressive army in the world, that allows us to talk like that.
For real.
Like, what are we doing here? So we're gonna act like we don't have the freedoms that we have because of the aggressive nature of American white men.
Yes, got more U.S. bases on foreign soil than any other country. Come on, y'all.
So is that for you, for the individuals? Is that a good thing or a bad thing for you? Because if you enjoy your freedom, how can you also criticize it? I'm just saying, because none of us will give up this freedom. None of us. I don't care who you are. Stop lying. You would not give up. You would not give up this freedom and this military might. You will not give it up, because you don't know any other way to exist.
That's true. So Dan, you made me think of another question.
Go ahead.
So you said it's the white man who has his military all over the world, and that's why we're able to enjoy this freedom. So is our freedom white supremacist freedom?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Has to be.
It is, but it's something we have to be honest about, because what other supremacy exists? First of all,
Good
that's the
point. Yeah,
no
yeah,
other supremacy exists, and there's no other. We're not enjoying the fruits of Asian freedom. We're
yeah.
not enjoying the fruit that there is no such thing as African freedom. We're not enjoying the fruits of Arab freedom, no Polynesian freedom, or none of that. We're directly under a system of white supremacy.
Yeah, that's what we got to grapple with.
I mean, if we're gonna be honest, yes, we are opponents and willing participants in the system of white supremacy.
Right. Yeah, because you're right. Our freedom comes at the expense of everybody else's freedom. I mean, most of the stuff we have is because of what's in these other countries that we've been dominating. You know, Venezuela and all these places in
Right,
Africa.
right,
You're right.
right. But at the same time, most of the people who would criticize it won't give it up. Like the brother in the video, you're able to say what you can say on that video because of the freedoms that we have due to white supremacy.
Right. And
But
I think, oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say that's hard for people to grapple with, even him. What was you gonna say?
But it also goes back to the aggressive male nature. But also, let's not forget, before Europeans showed up into Africa, African people were conquering each other as well. So what kind of masculine orientation is that? Is that African supremacy masculine orientation?
You just had to say that for the end. That was an excellent point. Yeah, because I mean, Egypt was a huge empire that was imperialist, and so were other African countries. So you're right. So yes, I see your point. Yeah, that's a great point.
Like when we talk about the expansion of Timbuktu, or the expansion of all these, the kingdom of Mali.
Mali, good point. Yes, you are so right.
Like,
so it can't be white supremacist oriented masculine.
I hate when we try to act like conquering is a white thing. No, it's a human thing. The Persians were not white. The Mongols were not white.
Yeah, you're right. You are so right.
Like we have to stop that. The Arabs, that can be argued, but humans conquer humans. That's what we do.
Okay, well, I want to go deeper then, because I've been thinking on this one, because I totally agree with your point. I'm gonna build on it. On this physical realm, I don't know of any species that can't survive without ingesting another species. Everything needs something here physical to survive. And as humans, we just need something else that, you know, plants and microorganisms don't use. But best believe the smallest microorganisms are ingesting other organisms to survive. I mean, that's what we're explaining on the human level.
Right. Also, when we're talking about being aggressive and all these things in the dark triad, because narcissism is something that we talk about a lot, and the narcissism was one of the three things in the dark triad. But I want people to understand that 0.05% of the American population are clinically diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder.
Oh, that's small. Wow.
Now, from what I saw, men are more likely to be narcissistic than women, but that goes into the nature of men having to be more aggressive and more political and more cunning to make things happen. Okay, women, all right, when you go home and your woman want a bigger house, you don't have to be more aggressive to go out and get more, to provide more, to get a bigger house.
Yeah, you're right. Or get aggressive with your budget. You cut your spending drastically. You do got to get aggressive. You're right.
But that would lead more to Machiavellianism, because Machiavellianism is more present, is more prevalent than the narcissism. And so for those who don't know what Machiavellianism is, it's a political theory advocating the principles of governing analyzed in Machiavelli's The Prince, in which political expediency is placed above morality, and craft and deceit are used to maintain the authority and carry out the policies of a ruler. So we're going to do what we got to do to get to where we need to get, and we're going to be slick. And I even pretend to be your best friend, but I'm going to stab you in the back 20 years from now. But once again, my wife just told me she want a bigger house. So should I go out and be more passive to get her what she needs, or should I be more aggressive?
You don't have to be more aggressive.
Now, that doesn't mean I have to be Machiavellian, but that does mean I need to be more aggressive.
Right.
So what are we talking about?
Again, we're talking about being human nature. That's why I loved how you went back in the past and you talked about how the warring African countries couldn't have been white supremacist orient masculinity. That's a great point.
History, man, when the Nubians went up to fight the Cushites, I mean the Egyptians, before white people showed up, before Europeans showed up, when the Nubians went to fight the Egyptians, what was that?
Man, must have been white supremacy.
We talk because we talk about all these great African empires, and we forget, we act like we don't understand how these empires expanded. How does a kingdom become an empire if somebody is not conquered?
And again, it's because we haven't fleshed out these ideas yet. Because when you say it, it's so simple, it makes total sense. But a lot of us haven't thought these thoughts. I hadn't thought that way because it makes it so plain then.
Right.
And I think a lot of times Black people want to stay away from anything considered negative, and being a dominator and a colonialist and an imperialist is considered negative. Aggressiveness is considered negative, when it's just, that's the way it is.
It's history. I mean,
yeah.
And I get it, because I do get it. I do get it, because a lot of our scholars, they gave what we call positive propaganda.
Yeah,
and the positive propaganda was needed at a time to boost morality and self-esteem.
Yes.
But what they failed to do is tell the whole truth. And yes, we needed to see ourselves in a positive light, but we also needed to see ourselves as human.
Yep.
And we're struggling to do that right now.
Hey, to build off of that, think about how many times we talk about the Black man is God, a Black man or Black woman is God. We're not being human. We're gods now. So it's hard to think on a human level when all this time we've been gods and goddesses and been in the stars and not doing the grunt work of like hunting and gathering and killing and being the soldiers that are helping, you know.
Now that's interesting you say that, because I was having a conversation with one of the same women that I asked about the traits, and she was like, that sounds like women. one of the main women. So because we're talking about Black people calling ourselves gods and goddesses and kings and queens.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, if you really think about it, whenever we go around calling ourselves gods, goddesses, and kings and queens, we're letting the world know that we are the last ones to really understand and find out that we actually had royalty.
Great point.
Because my thing is, so you all really believe that every other group of people on earth had royalty except Black people? Like, we're the only group of people who ever existed that didn't have kings and queens. And then when you found out we had kings and queens, you thought everybody in every aspect of all African societies were kings and queens?
Bro, you're so right. Because like you said, it is propaganda works. And like you said, it can be both positive and negative. But if it's always positive, we leaving out the reality that was left out because we only talked about the positive. Because like I said, I'm a teacher. So all my students, a lot of them are always saying, we was kings and queens. We was kings and queens. But then it's hard for them to sympathize with what's going on in Israel with Gaza and stuff.
Right.
Because those are real people experiencing these bombs and wars. So it's hard for them to come down to a human level. And I know it's the same for adults too, but I totally agree with you.
But it also goes into, it does show the extent of the mental job, that Negro mindset that have been placed on us, the niggerization of our minds. For us we really believe, because nobody taught us about our history, we really believe that we had no royalty.
Yep, I agree.
And then even the concept of the Black woman is God. If you study African cosmology, there was never a god without a goddess. There was never a goddess without a god.
Right.
They always came in pairs.
Yep, balance and duality.
That's nature.
Yep.
The Sma of Geb and Nut is the union of the sky and the earth.
Earth, right.
So there was also in the conscious community, there was also an overcorrection in the false narratives that were given about how black men were treating black women. You know, the color purpleization of it all.
That need to be the next show.
Hey, well, you know what?
I'm gonna interview all the females in my family and get their reaction, and then that could be the video.
Because when we're gonna talk more about the next show, because I have two ideas. So we might. I think we got our next two shows planned out. It just depends on the order on how we want to do them. But all in all, not to stretch this out, because I don't want to continue to be the dead horse, but I want us to really understand that, for one, to reiterate, let's make sure we do our research and don't just take people's word for it. And just because they talk fast, loud, and use big words and sound good, don't mean it's correct. Do your research, read everything thoroughly and carefully. If you don't know what it means, make sure you go look for definitions, but also check the historical context of it and make sure you know the narratives and everything around it, because this gentleman presented an idea, a theory, white supremacy-oriented masculinity, that he says exists, and when you Google it, nothing comes up. But the overall idea is, if black men accept traditional ideas of masculinity, then we will be more violent and bad to our women. And the study he used to make that point disagrees with that. So clearly he didn't read the whole study, because like we read, the studies show, and you can go read it for yourself, the study shows that when black men do adopt ideas of traditional masculinity and black masculinity, and they have not internalized ideas of self-hatred and white supremacy, negatively internalize those ideas, black men have more positive outcomes, especially within the right environments, with the right mentors and all those things. But when we do adopt ideas of white supremacy and inferiority, then there's a greater possibility of negative outcomes and more violent outcomes when it comes to the way we orient ourselves as men. That's what it's getting into, in a nutshell.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's why you got to come to the dean's office every other Thursday and get this lesson. Get this
for
lesson.
real.
So Black Family Institute, make sure y'all check it out on YouTube. If you have not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe, because you are already late. You're missing a lot of good content. Black Family Institute. The link is in the description. Comment, like, subscribe, share. Tell somebody about this. These conversations need to be had. These conversations need to be heard. And, you know, I'm Joseph Ward, Mr. Rodney Smith. We out.